Racing games are an extremely important genre in gaming, and honestly, I would say that it doesn't really matter what racing game you choose. It really just matters what game matches your playstyle. What do you like? Do you like tuning cars to be drift cars and then drifting them around? Or do you like realistic F1 sim games? Do you like arcade games? Or do you just want to drive around a large open world and just see stuff in your favorite car? It really depends on what you want from the experience. And there are just so many options at this point. But today, this video is about Forza. And I'm going to be telling you why I think that Forza Horizon 5 is definitely still the king of arcade racing games. And because, honestly, even though Motorfest is a great game, I think it's definitely lacking in some serious departments that I think will turn a lot of people off. So today we're going to be talking about why Forza Horizon 5 is still the king, and this has nothing to do with Forza Motorsport. Forza Motorsport is terrible. So anyway, let's get right into this. Firstly, the graphics. Now, I am not by any means saying that it looks better than Motorfest, because honestly, it doesn't. Motorfest looks just as good or better in some cases, just because of the lighting and also the setting. Hawaii is much more beautiful than Mexico, but that does not mean that Mexico is not beautiful. When you're driving around, I feel like it's more exciting to explore in Forza than in Motorfest, mostly because of its large setting. There's so many things to see, like underground, I don't know if it's exactly underground, but weird like caves with water and stuff and different barn finds and lots of places to explore. They're all very beautiful. Motorfest is a beautiful game, but it definitely lacks in some departments. And I feel like I prefer exploring it in Forza. But it tends to feel a little bit more empty, and Motorfest feels more like you're driving at sunset in Hawaii. Forza Horizon 5 feels a little bit more like you're driving out in the middle of nowhere, because you are. You're literally driving in the middle of nowhere. But the graphics are insane, and sometimes it really does feel photorealistic, and other times it does not feel so photorealistic. But it is a great looking game overall. And it's just a matter of personal preference. But let's get right into the next category. The next category is going to be physics and just how overall fun it is to drive around it in the game. And this is, I think, a little bit where Forza really starts to pull ahead. And it's because if you're comparing this game to Motorfest or most racing games in general, Forza is definitely the king of arcade physics. Now, I know you might think Gran Turismo is not really an arcade game, but it's fairly similar to one, and it's super easy to compare it to a game like Forza, because even though, it's going for a slightly different approach, it still matters what the physics feel like to drive in, and Forza easily feels the best. The Crew Motorfest physics allow you to stay absolutely planted to the ground, but it doesn't simulate wheel spin very well. It also doesn't really simulate drifting, because drifting is almost non-existent in the game. And in general, the game is very limiting, and the physics definitely feel like you're playing on an arcade machine, as arcade game means. Forza's physics definitely feel like a mix between like sim physics, but also having that sense of speed and that fun, and also having, wheel spin simulated, making it harder to launch and making it actually difficult to drive in. And that is something that Motorfest doesn't have, and Gran Turismo may have something a little bit similar, but the physics aren't really fun to drive in. And so Forza is definitely the king of arcade racers physics, even though some people may like other ones. I think the majority of the people would go with Forza physics. I don't think it's any news now. Forza's events are freaking bland. Now, I'm not saying you can't have any fun with them. In fact, half the time I have more fun with them than the other ones, just because it gives you a little bit more of a skill than, for instance, something like Motorfest. You don't really have to have any skill in Motorfest, in fact. Once you get the hang of those physics, you got the hang of the physics. It's that easy. Every car almost handles exactly the same. Gran Turismo does give you difficulty, but it ultimately just depends on if you can perfectly take those corners. It really just depends on what car you're using and if you put nitrous on it. And so Forza is the one that kind of steps out from the crowd because obviously you can tune any car to your liking. And so the difficulty for the events is a little bit more challenging. But the events are super bland as they're basically just the same thing in different locations on the map. And so it means that it's slightly at a disadvantage, especially compared to Motorfest, which has some of the most unique events of all time. But Forza has Event Lab, which is a thing where people can basically make their own events, making things from out of different movies they liked or different scenes they've seen on YouTube. One especially being like, for instance, Daytona. Somebody made a fairly realistic Daytona track. Somebody also made a pretty good replica of the Tokyo Drift parking garage. There are lots of different fun things you can do in this game. And that's partially why Forza is still a thing, is because there's so many creative things you can do in that game. The next, and I think the thing that's kept me playing Forza the most, has to be the customization. Now, before all you yappers start yapping and telling me, oh my god, Forza's customization sucks. There's not enough visual customization options. It sucks ass. Everything sucks and it's trash. Motorfest's better and so Need for Speed and everything sucks about Forza. Forza sucks. Like, dude, stop. Think about it. Just one freaking second. Okay, so here's how it goes. If you've ever played Need for Speed, the customization is really good. I mean, you can individually customize how the exhaust pipe looks, and there's, tons of options. You can customize every part of those vehicles, and that's great and all. But none of those customizations actually affect the car. You see, camber is also a problem in some games, too. But before we talk about the camber issue in Motorfest, let's just talk about also the customization in Motorfest, because it's very similar to Need for Speed. It's customization that's visual, but it doesn't affect your car. So you can add anything on there, rice it out, and it will not actually be a riced out vehicle. So that's kind of cool. And that's a great feature, and I think that's what a lot of people think of when they think of customization. But when I think of customization, I think of tuning my engine and stuff and tuning different parts on my car and making it show, like changing the tires. And the tire actually changes. It changes to what type of tire I just equipped. Changing the rim actually affects how your car handles. Changing the drivetrain usually drivetrains affect that. And then you can actually make the camber go out and it actually affects your car. Something that Motorfest doesn't even have. Motorfest has camber, but it doesn't visually show camber. So you can't raise or lower your suspension, and you literally can't stance your car whatsoever. So it means that cars just, if they look bad, they look bad. You can change visual customization stuff, bring your skirts down as low as you can, but you can never really slam it, and you can never really put out negative camber, and you can never really make it look like that really aggressive car that you want it to be. And that's why I think Forza still has the best customization. Even if it might feel or seem more limited at first, you can change literally any car into anything. You could take the most stock car of all time and change it into the greatest drag car of all time. And it's really neat because it means that somebody like me, who is a kid but is also learning a lot about cars and the way that cars work, has the freedom to just be stupid. Unlike in Gran Turismo, where it's more realistic, but you can't be stupid. You can be stupid, but you can't just put an anti-lag on literally anything. You can't just be crazy. And in something like Horizon, you can totally do that. You can put an anti-lag on the most ridiculous car. And that's one of the most sweet things about the game to me, because it means that you can do whatever you want. Do anything. And it makes the game so much more inviting. And drifting is actually really good in that game. The physics are great. And even though I didn't really touch on the drifting, I wanted to touch on it more in the customization thing, because they basically have a drift compound tire for like literally every car in the game. And even without the drift compound tire, some cars just drift really well. Plus they have formula drift cars, so drifting is just really good in that game. And it has some of the best drift physics of any game. Its physics in drifting are way more fun than Gran Turismo. Gran Turismo has some of the worst, and Need for Speed has some of the goofiest, and Motorfest also has some of the worst, just not quite as bad as Gran Turismo. In fact, honestly, Gran Turismo's physics are terrible, in my opinion, but technically the drifting is a little bit easier than Motorfest, but it's not really easier, it just kind of works better if you're good at it. But in Motorfest, the physics are just really, really bad. But the customization in Motorfest is bad because you can't change really any of those engine components. You can do the really basic upgrading stuff, but you can't really internally change the sound. You can't engine swap. You can't stance your car. It's very limited. And there are a lot of different types of cars like drift and that stuff. But that actually brings us right into our next category, which is car selection. Now, the car selection in Need for Speed, Gran Turismo, Forza, and brand new Motorfest they're all very good. Gran Turismo definitely has the most bland one, as it has good futuristic cars, but they definitely don't really feel as premium, should I say. There's a lot of cars that are just normal mom cars, and that's a good thing. We need more of that in games. But Forza has just as many or more, and I think the problem with that, for a lot of people at least, is that the models can sometimes look a little bit dated. But it's okay, because honestly, they all look super stunning anyway, because of the shading and because of the lighting. And in the Forza Vista mode, they all look at least half decent. None of them look bad. Sometimes the bottoms of the old ones look a little bit goofy, but none of them really look bad. But anyway, that brings me back to the point of what I was talking about Motorfest, which is one of, I think, its biggest problems. And again, that kind of goes back to the customization point, as you can't tune anything. So for instance, if you wanted to make, a Supra MK4 or a 880 or whatever you want to call it, if you wanted to make one of those a drift car, you can. I mean, you can try and tune it to have less grip and stuff, but it's never going to drift like a drift car in that game. Because each category is like a set physics model. And so the physics models for each of these different things is really different. And there's only one MK4, and it's the Street Tier 2 or 1. And it is not the best car ever. It really doesn't feel too good to drive because it doesn't drift at all. And Supras are known for drifting. It's like the whole thing about them. So it's really sad and unfortunate that you can't do that. And that's the case for a lot of cars. And sometimes the cars, might have a Street Tier 2 car that you want to have camber, but it really doesn't, and there's no way to make it look like it has camber stance. But then you might see a car next to it that's the same car, but it's all decked out. But no, you can't get that one in this game. You have to get it in the Crew 2. And chances are, it's not just you go and play the game and you buy it. It's probably a summit reward or something. Or a reward that was limited time to get. So, the majority of people are not going to be able to get that. And the people that want to drive these drift cars, you can't. Because they straight up just won't let you. Because either it's in the Crew 2 or they just don't freaking have one. And that's my biggest beef with Motorfest, other than the terrible physics model. But other than that, Forza has a great library. It has tons and tons of cars. While some of the models might be a bit dated, it's alright. They're not bad. None of them are unplayably bad looking. They all still feel next gen, and the physics and handling model is great, even for older cars and trucks. And honestly, the car selection is great. It has tons of trucks, and while some of the cars that you might just want are kind of rare and are expensive, it's not like it's that hard to make money in the game. The best way to make money, by the way, is to, at least the most easiest but also most legit way, not just scamming people on the auction house, is basically just get to grind every week to get the for festival playlist rewards, both of them, and then sell those 2 cars, or keep them and have those cars. And that's how you can get a bunch of money and buy those cars that you really wanted to buy, like this old Chevy that I bought, and it was kind of expensive, but it's an old Chevy truck, and they don't have that legit. But there's also some cars that are locked behind a car pass, and of course there's DLC cars. But in general, all the cars are freaking awesome, and it's a really fun game, and I think it definitely has one of the best car selections. Need for Speed definitely has the most limited car selection. It has basically a few older cars, like I'm talking about like Unbound, and like Heat's a little bit better, but Unbound has like some older cars that you're just never gonna use. Like you're probably just gonna get a Crown Vic or something at first, and then you'll just never pick up those older cars. The trucks, there's really no reason to have the trucks. So I think the problem is with that game is it's really kind of actually difficult to make money in the game. But there's so many cars that you might want, but you're probably never gonna get them. And I think that's people's biggest beef with Forza, is the progression's bad. At least that's what they say. But it also means that you can buy a good chunk of the cars, this large car selection. So even if it's easy to make money and not very difficult, because you can just get a lot of money from wheel spins and selling cars, in the end, you can get to drive all these different cars that you wanted to drive. Whereas something like Need for Speed Unbound, that arguably doesn't really have that good of a progression system, but does make it hard to make money. You're probably never going to get to drive some of these cars that you want. Motorfest is a good mix in between them. Like, it's not too terribly hard to get money, but it's also difficult enough that you do kind of have to grind a little bit. But most of the cars that you're going to be wanting are going to be fairly affordable. And the more fancier cars are going to be more expensive. But Forza definitely, I think, does the best job at kind of making money feel valuable. Like Motorfest, it's definitely a resource that you spend, so you get it and then you spend it. Like, I've never had a time in that game where I've just felt rich. Like, I'm just rich. I have a lot of money and I'm not going to spend it. Because you're always trying to get that next new car that they just added, or that next car that's the best car up from the one you have, or the next car for the next category for the grand race. And so you're doing that the whole time. Whereas Forza, you get money from wheel spins and stuff, where you get money from selling cars, and you don't want to spend it. You want to hold on to it, because you could spend it on this one car, or you could wait till the next Forza festival, and you could make more money, and then get that next car that you wanted to get. You could keep all this money, because cars can be really expensive in that game on the auction house. So there's a reason to have like 40 million plus, because cars are super expensive sometimes. And so that makes money more valuable. But anyway, at this point, I'm just talking about stuff that you can already probably know from playing the game. And that's going to be it for this video. That's why I think Forza is still the king. I think Motorfest is a great game if you're just kind of burnt out on Forza. But believe me, I think you'll come back after you've basically gotten the cars that you wanted. Because after that, there's not really anything else to do in the game. Because driving around isn't really that fun. Exploring isn't really that fun. The grand race gets boring. So at a certain point, you just gotta do something else. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace.